that night, was very surprised to receive off a friend going, "How funny is your brother?" And I was like, "What? Like, I'm about to face amputation. What the hell is this person talking about?" And I clicked open the invite that he'd sent to everyone. And it was an invitation, and it had legs all over it. And it simply read, "You're invited. Kath's last day with 2 legs barbecue." And I just honestly wet myself. And I was just like, this is too great. I love this so much.
Have you ever been to a last day with 2 legs party? Nope, me neither. But Kath Koschel has. In fact, the party was a celebration of her last day with 2 legs. After a life-altering back injury, Kath was this close to having one of her legs amputated, which would have been absolutely terrifying. And here's the kicker. It wasn't even the first time she'd broken her back. Have you ever wondered what your limit is? Like, really considered what you'd have to come up against before you'd give up completely? Kath Koschel's the founder of The Kindness Factory, a non-profit on a mission to make the world a kinder place. And look, she's seen more hardships than anyone I've ever spoken to. And yet, she still hasn't reached that limit. After breaking her back not once, but twice in the span of 5 years, facing the possibility of having her leg amputated, and dealing with an absolutely crushing personal loss, you'd really forgive Kath if she simply lost all hope. But she hasn't. How could one person face so much adversity and just keep on keeping on? I'm Kellie Riordan, and this is Curveball, the show where you spend time with the world's most impressive people. Kath, welcome to Curveball.
Thanks for having me, big fan.
So 1 minute you're on a cricket pitch and you're playing for New South Wales in a sport that you absolutely love. And then the next, you're on your way to hospital with a fractured spine. What do you remember most vividly about that day back in 2012?
Yeah, so what happened was I was preparing for a game, essentially. So to rewind a little bit, I'd been diagnosed with a prolapsed disc at my L5-S1 area. And I knew it was not treacherous and like diabolical in terms of the injury, but I knew it was bad enough to be considered unfit to play. In saying that, I was in the form of my life. I had never been hitting the ball as well as what I was as a batter, and I'd successfully held my spot in the New South Wales Breakers, arguably the best domestic sporting team this country's ever seen. So when you're a diehard tragic like I am, and you're given a chance to play, you never really say no to that. So I was given a 50-50 chance, and the chance was mine alone to make. Do I play the next game, hold my spot, etc.? And I chose yes, of course. And I have zero regrets about that. The complication comes in that I was advised medically in the lead up to that to have a cortisone injection in my spine. So, I'd started experiencing a condition called foot drop. So we knew that my back was pretty bad, and that potentially a cortisone injection could help. Now, they did a double cortisone injection. So they came from each side of the spine, and it was a big dose, and it was supposed to free me up. I was having problems dorsiflexing my left foot. So that's raising the toes, which you sort of need to be able to do as a batter. So I was navigating that injury, and I guess the idea was that the cortisone injection would be able to free that up and I could get that movement back. What they didn't tell me was that when you have a cortisone injection, that you're supposed to, be exercise free for the next sort of 3 days or something like that. I had the cortisone on the Friday and I played on the Sunday, and someone either forgot to tell me or I'm not really sure what happened there. But I woke up, it was just a normal sort of Sunday. The way that you sort of prepare as an athlete is very individual. We all have our own little quirks. And I remember actually playing 3 games of solitaire. It's really interesting to go back on this. Just the games on your phone. This is like close to 12 years ago now, I think, or 10 years ago now. I remember I used to just get into a rhythm of breakfast to distract myself and just playing a game of random solitaire on my phone as I ate breakfast. I think it was Weet Bix and a banana. something like that. And then off to the ground I go. I was always a bit of a big preparer. So I wasn't naturally gifted as a cricketer. Like most things in my life, I just work really hard at it and I'm quite passionate about it, and then I can turn it into, a strength and that kind of thing. So, preparation was something that I always took quite seriously as an athlete. I didn't take for granted the position that I was in to be able to play and represent my state and do all those sorts of things. And so probably, I think I got there like 90 minutes to 2 hours early, mucking around, having a coffee, playing with some of my teammates that may have gotten there earlier as well. And then in anticipation for the toss, because I was an opening batter, you're sort of waiting around for that. Will I bat first? If so, I've got to be switched on. Will I not? Otherwise, I'll be fielding, etc. So waiting for the toss, got the toss, we were fielding first. And the accident, as it happened, was when I was actually fielding. So I didn't get a chance to bat that day or anything like that, of course. But it was just such a freak, really quick thing to happen. So I was fielding in cover. And that's the position between, if you sort of had if you're looking at a cricket field in a bird's eye view, that's the position between the batter and the bowler, essentially. And that's a pretty specialist spot. So I don't know why I was there. I didn't normally field in that position. It must have just been that I don't really know how I ended up in that position. I used to sit in the slips because I used to be a wicket keeper as a kid and I could catch. So it was a bit of a different kind of position. But as I'm there, you walk in, bowler comes in, that kind of thing. And I could see through the angle of where the bat was being swung and the backlift of the batter that it was probably going to come my way. And as it did, it connected quite well with the ball, the batsperson did. It raced off to the boundary. So there was no chance of me being able to save, it was too far away from me, all that kind of stuff. And that just happens in cricket, it's a really good shot. So it was really nonchalant kind of situation where I wasn't anticipating a run out or a catch, or it wasn't like I was extending myself or anything like that. It was very, very basic movement. So the ball gets hit past me very quickly, races off to the boundary. And I thought I'll conserve some energy and just trot on off, roll the ball back in and off we go. And as I twisted to my left to go off and chase after the ball, the disc that we'd been working with in trying to get back in, it came out so quickly that the two vertebrae had nowhere to go, and they just cracked onto each other. And then part of the bottom vertebrae cracked off and it went straight into my spinal cord. So that's where all the symptoms sort of started for me. But obviously, it's such an internal injury, you don't know what's going on. And you just start it honestly felt like I'd been shot. I can't hand on my heart say what it's like to be shot and have been shot. That's not part of my story. But if I could imagine what it would be like to take a bullet, it felt like that. I lost air. I couldn't breathe. It felt like, and that wasn't a panic attack. It was just part of, I think my ribs popped out at the back as well. So it wasn't just the broken vertebrae. It was the ribs started to pop out. And I don't really even know how it all happened, but struggling to breathe. Thankfully, there was actually a physiotherapist there who was supporting, just kind of watching. And as I went down and was in a lot of pain and all those sorts of things, and my teammates were almost there going, this was such a non-event. Like, it wasn't like I dove and tried to stop a ball or anything like that. It was just very basic. And they were really confused. They were like, what on earth is going on? So I think some run to my aid and, circled around me and things like that. And I really don't remember their reactions because I think I was too absorbed in my own pain and things like that. And then I think as people started to realise that I couldn't get up and things like that, I must have been complaining of I can't feel my legs. Someone must have signalled, can anyone help, etc., call an ambulance, etc. And this physio come on and took off my shirt and realised that there was a bit of a cave in the back of my, how do you say that? In the back of my back, in the middle of my back.
Yeah.
She was able to fix those ribs so that I could breathe again. And then after that, it was straight to an ambulance and taken to the nearest hospital. So, and I was there that, they scanned up and they were like, oh, this is really serious. Off to surgery you go, etc. So family got called, all that kind of stuff. And it was so interesting. My life changed so quickly and so suddenly. Here I was. I'd put all of my eggs in the one basket as a kid. All I ever wanted to do was play cricket. I just loved it. I've got 3 older brothers. They all played. I loved hanging out with them in the backyard. And then to be able to represent my state doing it was a pretty amazing feeling, but short time, not a long time for sure. Well, a good time, not a long time.
So, it's so crazy, Kath. Like, my husband broke his back in rural Turkey.
Wow.
And it's just funny when you say, so he did a compression fracture of the T12, but also an unstable fracture. So he had to have surgery over there. But just when you said to me about he was so winded and he couldn't talk for like, many, many minutes. And I'm just like, oh my God, that's right. Just the volume of shock to your body and the winding. Oh my God, I can't even imagine. So you couldn't feel anything below the waist. You end up having multiple surgeries. You spend weeks in traction, which must be like some kind of form of hell on earth, if you ask me. And then you're told you're unlikely to walk again. So what was going on in your mind when you were told that?
I guess so the first hospital I was at, I had five surgeries, and they each time trying to go in, fix the problem, and unsuccessful. So, you come out of recovery, you got a lot. You're so groggy. You got a lot of drugs going through your system. You're still in a lot of pain. They've cut through scar tissue and all that kind of stuff. And to then hear after every single one of those 5, mate, we haven't fixed it. Sorry, we've got to go again. Or after the 5th, it was like I think we're out of options here. It's, it's life in a wheelchair, that kind of thing. So I'd sort of resigned myself to that fact. And one surgeon was doing this new age technique. It's much more common now. But back then there was only one surgeon in the country doing it with great success. And it's called a total disc replacement. And the idea is that you go in, they cut through the stomach this time, not the back. And the idea is that there's a lot less scar tissue to cut through. When you go through the back, it's muscle, all that kind of stuff, whereas the stomach, it's like the fatty layers of tissue, and then they shift the vital organs aside. So it's quite invasive. But the idea is that you get a whole lot more mobility. So if your husband's had a broken spine, he may have had historically something like a fusion or something like that. It's a very common surgery for backs. With this one, what they do is they don't fuse it at all. They line the titanium, they line the vertebrae with titanium reinforcement, and then they put like a ball and socket kind of joint in there. So there's one that has a little bit of it's a flat piece with a bit of a divot in it, and then there's the piece that goes on top has like a half a ball essentially. And when they meet and they're lined with that titanium, it just means that you get a whole lot more mobility. When you have the fusions, you're quite rigid. And because I was so young and fit and healthy and, I guess everyone else thought that I was never going to get back on the park. But for me, I don't know if I'm naive or couldn't grasp. It was probably something psychological where I couldn't let go of the fact that I just wanted to play cricket again. So for me, everyone's going...
Some would say denial, Kath.
Some could say that, yeah. It was interesting though, because everyone's like, just focus on breathing, then potentially walking and feeling. And I was just like, well, I'll be back by next season. It's fine.
Playing for my country would be...
Pretty much. Yeah, that'd be great if we could organise that. Yeah, doc, let's go for that. So I think that actually helped a lot, like in that initial stage where, as you said, traction for 2 weeks, it's a lot of people's idea of hell, and it's certainly mine. I'm a very fidgety person. I struggle with concentration, all that kind of stuff in a office setting. So to lay there, you're looking up at a ceiling for 2 weeks with drugs going through your system, a hell of a lot of pain, and nothing but your thoughts. And I guess like the helpful part to that was that a lot of the pain meds make you quite groggy, so you sleep a lot more. But even holding a book was a challenge because you had to hold it in the one position. And I mean, there were things that we did to pass the time. My dad was there with me in support. He tried to keep me company. You have your phone, all that kind of stuff. But certainly not my idea of fun, lying there for that long in traction. But the idea is that I get a lot more mobility with that surgery. And essentially it was just presented to me as, this is basically your only option. It's this or wheelchair for life. You're probably never going to walk again. So you take that, don't you?
And you mentioned your dad there, and I know your family has been so supportive. You're very close to your brother Grant. How important were they in those initial times, and your mates as well?
I'm not here without my support networks. I would never claim to say that I've done any of my life alone, and I'm so fortunate because they are truly phenomenal people. And when I think of my family and my friends who deserve everything, in my opinion, it always gets me quite emotional because I honestly wouldn't be here without them, without the collective group of people that make up my little village or my little tight network, my tidies. And you can't put it, I actually consider myself to be the luckiest person alive which is interesting when you hear a story like mine. And I say that because I'm not my family or my closest friends. I think a much harder thing to do would be to support someone to go through the things that I have. And for that, I just think they're the toughest and strongest and most incredible people that I'll ever know. So I'm not I think you always get labelled with certain tags and things like that. And I'm proud to be labelled as resilient and anti-fragile and kind and all these things, but I'm not here without those people. So they deserve those titles just as much as I do. And I get a lot of credit for the work that I do, but really I'm just my DNA, I think, is just a collection of people who have made me. And some are here still to this day and others aren't, but I wouldn't be here without them. And that's a fact.
And I think you rang your best mate at one particularly low point, pretty early on, I think. What did you say to her?
It was early on. I was in rehab. So essentially that surgery was almost deemed a success, and went back home, was recovering, and then a complication happened as a result of that surgery, which landed me in rehab. And they essentially said to me, 6 to 12 months, we can't guarantee that you'll be walking at the end of it, but it's your only chance. So pack up your life, quit your job, no more athlete, nothing like that. And again, no real other choices. So off to rehab I went, and it's such a tough, I'd never heard of rehab for that long. I thought it was like a 6-week thing that you did if you were struggling post an injury or something like that. I honestly didn't think it existed for much longer than that. So the thought of being there as an inpatient for that long was a very confronting task for me. When I got there, I was put in, there was 3 categories. There was the over 65s, the over 75s and the over 85s. And because of numbers, I was in the wrong ward at the start. I was put in the over 85s category.
And you're like 26, right? Or 25 or something.
I was 23 at the time. And I had to make that my own. Like I learnt so much about life in that ward. An 85-year-old war veteran who taught me a whole lot about perspective. All I'd ever really cared about was cricket, right? And here I am next to a man who's like put his life on the line for us as a sacrifice. And I was just like, wow, this is a struggle. Like his life is adversity. And it's not to compare or anything like that, but it really put my situation into perspective, which made my time a little bit more bearable. But it's a really beautiful moment, and we're still I get emotional when I talk about this because she's just incredible. Erin, my best friend, I remember calling her a week into my stay, and I was just struggling. Like I was like, I've barely gone through my first week of this. Physically, emotionally, spiritually, I am a mess. Like I am such a mess. And I kept getting way too far ahead of myself. I was like, how am I going to get through 6 to 12 months of this if I can't get through my first week and I'm already struggling? And so it was one of those moments where I was like, well, who do I call? And the first person that I started dialing was Erin, my best friend. And she picked up and she says to me, what's going on? I said, look, I'm really struggling. And I had tears streaming down my face. And she goes, I can tell what's up. And I said, I think I need you to come pick me up. And she says to me, what do you mean? She was really confused. I come visit you yesterday. You're
there for 12 months.
What do you mean? Where do you need to go? Like, has something happened? And I was like, if this means that I'll never walk again or whatever, then I can accept that. So be it. There's not a chance in hell that I can stay here for 6 to 12 months. I've barely gotten through this first week and I'm a mess. And I'll never, ever forget what she said to me. She said, and she started to get really emotional, and she's not a very or overly emotional person. And she said, Kath, it's absolutely breaking me to hear you this way. And I could hear the crack in her voice. And she said, you're my best friend. There's nothing in the world I wouldn't do for you. You know that. If I could take on this challenge for you, I would. But I can't. and that's something that I have to live with. But what I can do is I can promise you this: if you call me at any hour of the day, I don't care what time it is, I'll pick up that phone and I'm going to walk this journey side by side with you. And it was a really profound moment in our friendship, in our relationship, and things like that, in that I didn't feel alone anymore. And I think rehab and certainly hospital environments as well, obviously you're not in hospital or rehab because you're thriving in life, right? But they do have a way to make you feel very isolated and alone, regardless of the visitors that are coming in and things like that. Like, you know that they're only there temporarily and that you've got to stay and keep kicking on and find the grit and the resilience and things like that. And I just felt like someone had my back. I was like, if I can just put one foot literally in front of the other, there's a person that's waiting for me at the end of this, like my best friend. It's on to greener pastures, and I can do this. I can do this if I've got her support and others as well. And I think it's different for everyone. I'm very motivated by the goodness of others, and so if they, invest in me by belief, then I sort of feel like, if I can't do it for myself, then I've got to do it for them because they believe in me and they're on this journey with me. And so it just meant everything. I don't think she knew that at the time, but it was exactly what I needed to hear. I think moments like that are so powerful. She could have easily just gone, mate, this is too hard, and hung up the phone, all that kind of stuff, or I don't have the capacity to listen to this, it's really heavy, etc. And she never did. And I'd encourage anyone, if you've got a person in your life who might be struggling physically, mentally, in whatever way, show up for them, because I can guarantee it's the best thing that you'll ever do for a person, especially when they need it or when they're that vulnerable as well. And yeah, as I said, it just strengthened our relationship. We're so close now. We always have been, but even closer.
I'm Kellie Riordan, and this is Curveball. And Kath Koschel's about to discover that small acts of kindness don't have to come from close friends. In fact, they can come from complete strangers. This is Curveball, and my guest Kath Koschel is learning that even the smallest of actions can make the world of difference to the right person. For her, that lesson began in an elevator.
This is really the reason behind Kindness Factory. It's now a global movement and something I'm so proud of. I was having another rough day at rehab, and I'm in a wheelchair. I still don't know if I'm going to walk again, and I'd just been given the news basically that it's a pretty tough ask. Like, the chances of me walking again after that injury were probably like 2.5%, something like that. And they were like, look, you can stay here as long as you need, and you need to stay here because you're at least, there was a complication that saw me come within or very close to having my leg amputated. And they said, you need to keep your leg healthy. That's quite life-threatening. And you've got a journey to go get there. Plus, if you ever want the chance of walking again, here you go. And then to be told by the specialists that, walking shouldn't be the goal because that's very unlikely to happen. You sort of then, your head drops and you're like, wow, what am I doing here then? Because I don't love it. I don't love being here. And as I went out of that consult room, I get to an elevator and must have just looked really down on my luck, and I was probably in a very deep thought process. I was trying to process all the news that I'd just been given. All I wanted to do, I could just feel I was about to crack and just cry everywhere. And I just needed to get down to my room. That's all. I was like, I can get down to my room, I can breathe again, I can just let it all out. And as I'm sat there waiting, like at the elevator shaft, I go to try and press the button, which is unusual because it's at rehab and there's lots of people with wheelchairs and things like that. And I just couldn't reach it.
Oh my God.
It was centimetres outside of my reach, and I was just like, oh my God. And it's so silly because I'd just been given this big news that should have been my undoing, which kind of was. It was a catalyst for me being in the frame of mind that I was. Yet here I am at a lift or an elevator, and the thing that is my undoing that just cracks me and breaks me into tears again is the fact that it's centimetres outside of my reach, and I just felt so defeated. I was like, oh my God, like this is the rest of my life. Like, I'm going to struggle with this kind of stuff for the rest of my life. And as I did that, I sort of probably must have had my head just in my hands or in a defeated way, just sort of looking down. And I heard the ping of the elevator. And then I realised that this stranger had walked past, seen that I couldn't actually hit the button, and had pressed that button for me. And as I saw him walk off towards the toilet or wherever it was that he was going, never once did he look back to try and see if I was surprised or thankful or grateful or anything like that. He just went off and carried on with his day. He didn't need to get into the lift. He just knew that I did. And I remember looking at him going, oh my God, and I got into the elevator and I got down and I just cried. But I just kept thinking about this guy. I was just like, he's just changed the entire course of my day. Like, I've just been presented this horrible news that I'm never going to walk again, essentially. I'm completely crushed by the fact that I can't even reach the elevator button. And he's just done it. And he didn't expect any thanks, praise, recognition or anything. He's just seen a person struggling. He's gone, I can help there. And he's pressed it. And I thought, those micro moments that we have every single day, we have them. And I think sometimes it's just like a reminder to people that every interaction, is it with your barista that makes your coffee? Is it, the person that you walk past on the way into the office? Every interaction that we have with a person has the potential, essentially through effort or whatever means, to change a person's life in a positive way or a negative way, essentially. So a positive way could be pressing the button or saying g'day or smiling at a stranger. A negative one could be dismissing someone, ignoring them completely, or telling them to get racked if they talk to you, for example. And I think my mission almost, like in recognising and realising a lot of these little things that kept happening, like you don't go through adversity like I do and live to tell the tale without receiving a lot of kindness through people that support networks, but also random strangers. And essentially with those little things that kept popping in, when I was well enough to do so, Kindness Factory became quite tangible and easy to action.
One of the things that I find really fascinating about this, because you're such a capable, determined person who's getting on with stuff in life and, as you say, really hard worker, you actually have to learn to take those little gifts. So when someone gives you this random act of kindness, right, you've actually got to learn to accept that gift, to accept help, which is not an easy not an easy thing for a person like you to do. And there's this classic story where when you wake up at one point after your first surgery, you're back at home, and you wake up and your leg's feeling kind of weird and you think, I better go to the hospital. Now, a normal person in this situation would call out to their flatmate for some help, but instead you decide to drive yourself. So was it a journey for you to start to see, not just see these signs, but accept the kindness of strangers or the kindness of friends or the support of people around you?
Absolutely. I think it's really important to understand your strengths and weaknesses as a person. And we don't even have to call them weaknesses. They could be opportunities for growth, for example. And we all have them, little things that could derail us at any one time because none of us are perfect. And mine has always been, I guess it's because I'm the youngest kid of four, but also the only girl. And so I think from a young age, I was like, if I cried, it was like, don't be a girl. And my brothers aren't mean people. It was just how it worked in a family ecosystem and environment. And we're from the bush and all that kind of stuff. And I guess that just really instilled a fierce need for independence for me. I'm a very independent person who, and it's not like to say that I can't accept help and all that kind of stuff, but very stubborn as well. And I think, as you mentioned, that's a very big example of that. It wasn't me being stubborn or having to do it alone. It was just that instance was, it was probably a combination of stubbornness and independence, but also I didn't want to inconvenience my flatmates. I was like, it's 4 o'clock in the morning. I'd be really filthy if someone woke me up. I probably wouldn't, but it was probably a combo of both of those things. Crawled myself out. But it's a learning process, and I think honesty to yourself as well in those situations when I've struggled immensely with some big mental health issues, post-traumatic stress, etc. And I think the difference between PTSD and PTSG, so post-traumatic growth, or when you transfer between the two and go from post-traumatic stress to growth, is when you can kind of accept, I guess, areas that you might be languishing or lacking in. And it's not that we're ever going to strive for perfection, but it's like, okay, well, where could I have gone better in that situation? And when I broke my back the second time, it almost became a process where I could think back and go, well, what worked the first time for me? And what were the things that I was most proud of? And the things that I was like, I wish I had done that a little bit better. And you can almost like learn from that and then put them into action. And life becomes a bit more simple and a bit easier as well. But everything's a learning process. I think it's honesty to ourselves is quite important every day as well. It could be, what did I do well today? What did I not do so well? Where am I struggling? Where are my pain points? And how do I continue to grow from every experience, really?
And one good example of this is, because at one point they do say, go home, pack your bag, you're coming back to hospital next week, we have to amputate your leg. Is it true that you decided to celebrate that amputation in some way?
I didn't, but my family did. My family are they're amazing. They're so good.
They do have some black humour though, I reckon.
Yeah, they do. I think, we all cope in different. I hide behind so much humour; it's not funny. And I've got the Australian kind of sarcastic, and I need to sometimes rein that in. When I share some of my stories in the US, I travel the world as a motivational speaker. Sometimes I think they get a little bit lost with my humour, and they get quite shocked, and they're like, did she just actually say that they did that? My brother, who is amazing, they were like, so basically we got 2 weeks to get this pressure back up in my leg before it gets amputated. And I tried my very best, but essentially they said it was to no avail. It's not going to be kept. And I'd resign myself to the fact that it was going. And thankfully for me, that was resolved and we fixed the problem. But the day before I was due to be amputated was a Sunday. So I was going to get amputated on a Monday. And my brother put together, he just rang my closest family and friends who meant everything to me and said, look, obviously Kath's got the surgery coming up. We're just gonna get everyone together at mum and dad's for a barbecue. Is that okay? Like his time, all that kind of stuff. I'll send out an invite later. And then my friend, that night, was very surprised to receive off a friend going, how funny is your brother? And I was like, what? Like I'm about to face amputation. What the hell is this person talking about? And I clicked open the invite that he'd sent to everyone. And it was an invitation and it had legs all over it. And it simply read, you're invited. Kath's last day with 2 legs barbecue. And I just honestly wet myself. And I was just like, this is too great. I love this so much. And then on the menu was a leg of lamb, a leg of ham, and anything. I think chicken feet was on it as well. I'd never tried chicken feet. There was just all these links, strong links to humour and legs essentially, which was, and that's how my family, we tend to try and find the light side of life, and it works for me. I always sort of say there's 3 things that I say at the end of a keynote, and it's always, have you laughed today? I'm glad that you have, Kel, now. I certainly have.
I'm sort of crying at the same time, but yeah.
Have you laughed today? Yeah, more so it releases the chemicals, right? And so if you're going through a struggle or an adversity, you've been through plenty, especially most recently, when we can laugh, and it doesn't have to be at the situation, like find whatever works for you, but when we can laugh, and I mean that like kind of belly laugh, like that produces the hormones and the chemicals that rush through your body, immediately that struggle or that adversity becomes a little bit more tangible. Like you can look into it with a bit more of a positive viewpoint because you've just laughed and had a bit of a lighter side of life. And so I think humour plays a huge role, especially in Australian culture, right? But in adversity, I think it's such a tool, like it's a tool that we can all use to tackle any kind of struggle that we might have or stress or whatever it is. Like, so if you haven't laughed today, go onto YouTube, tell someone a joke, get someone to tell you a joke, whatever it is, figure it out. So I think humour is an incredible tool for all of us to use in our toolbox of resilience and well-being as well.
It's so true. I was thinking, I broke my arm earlier this year. We were in the middle of, we had to move out of our house because it got flooded. And anyway, the day of the surgery, I'd fallen over on the hockey field, not playing for my state. Just playing club hockey. But I had to ring Rachel, my producer, who works at Dead Set Studios, because my husband had to meet some insurance people back at the house. So to get to the actual hospital to have my surgery, and I could have called other family members and whatever, but it just so happened that I called Rachel. So she turns up and she's like, oh, look at you, what a mess. Your arm's in a slab and in a sling and all the rest of it. And because I'd got ready by myself, I realised when I went to get in the car, I couldn't do my shoelaces up. So I've come downstairs with my shoelaces flopping all over the place. And the first thing I've said to her, she's taken one look at me looking like a sad sack. And I'm like, can you please do up my shoelaces? And we both just lost it because it was so funny. And she knows that I'm like you, I'm not very good at asking for help. And it lightened the whole day for me and the whole trip to the hospital, and, it just makes such a difference. You grew up in this really loving family in regional New South Wales. And was it the fact that you had 4 brothers and you were in a regional town that drew you to cricket in the first place? Like, why cricket?
I don't know. A lot of people say that. I think it was, I was born into a family of, I've got 3 older brothers, and I was a bit of an accident, I think. I don't think I was supposed to sort of happen. And but Mum always wanted a girl. So my mum is amazing. The only thing she ever wanted to be was a mum. So career, all that kind of stuff. She was fine to work, but she just wanted to be the best mum that she could always be. And so, the story goes that her and Dad got together, and then she was just within a month of getting engaged, when are we going to have children? And she was only 20 or something when all this happens. And Dad's like, no, when we get the house, we can then start the family and do all that. And he's very, I guess, traditional in thinking, financial security, etc. And so she was just chomping at the bit to be a mum. And obviously she has my 3 brothers, and then I'm born. And I think she was just perfect. I've got 3 great sons. But I've got this little girl who will be my own, and it's almost like we'll have this great relationship, and we do. She's amazing. My mum and I, in terms of our interests, though, could not be further apart. We are so different. She hates sport, with a passion. If it's on the TV, she'll complain, hates it. Whereas she could sit there all day and knit and do all the, and all the girly things she just loves, right? And so she just wanted a little girl. So here she is, she gets me, I'm 4, she's I'll get her into ballet, and I just hated it. I hated the culture of ballet. I must have a bad teacher, all that kind of stuff, who just was always kind of berating me because I never wanted to be there, so I wasn't interested, etc. And I just loved playing cricket in the backyard with my brothers. And Dad was like, not that you had to be good at it, but he was like, you're actually on par with your brothers, all that kind of stuff. Do you want to play? And I was like, I loved the whites. I was like, let me get the whites on. I'd get in my brother's gear, and everyone was like, what are you doing in that? You do ballet on the weekend. And I was like, I just want to play cricket. And Dad signed me up, and I was the only girl in the team and all that. I think for cricket, I love the tradition in it. I love how much history is involved in the game. But I also love that it's a team sport, obviously. So there's 11 people on the park with you at any given time. And yet it's so individual in that, it can come down to one person to hit the winning runs or to take a catch or to take a wicket or whatever it is that you're doing. And at any given moment, win, lose or draw, you've got your mates around you to support you or to celebrate with you or to commiserate with you or whatever it is, because while it might rest on one person to do that one thing, it's never it's all your fault that the game's over. It's a collective effort, right? And I think it was almost like family for me. Every time I stepped out onto that field, I didn't think about any other thing apart from playing cricket with my mates. And so I just loved it. I was such a tragic. I got really obsessed with the history of it. I was very fortunate to go and play as an overseas professional player for Middlesex at the home of cricket in Lords. That was our home ground. And that was such an amazing experience for me, especially as a woman, right? Back then the profile wasn't as big as what it is. And so to be able to do all that kind of stuff, it was pretty amazing. And yeah, I still love it. My Erin, my best friend, still plays. She's sort of borderline on the Australian, in the Australian system set up and all that kind of stuff as well. And I still love it. I don't think I miss playing anymore because I see all the aches and pains that my mates have. But I love watching. I love being involved in it. I still sit on a committee for the community impact stuff with Cricket Australia. I've done some consulting stuff to the ACA. I've held administration roles, etc. But yeah, I love it. Just love it.
And there was this moment where you decided to go into the Sydney cricket ground late at night to try and do some rehab, but you kind of needed a little bit of extra help.
I did, yeah. So that was such that 2-week period when I got told essentially I needed to exercise to keep my leg attached. That was such a stressful time for me. And it was unlike many of my other challenges in that it was almost like there was a deadline that I had to meet, and the only person in control of my destiny was me. And so I couldn't rely on teammates or anyone like that. I had to get the work done, and I'm pretty good like that. Like I work well to a deadline. But I couldn't sleep. So I'm up all hours of the morning, day, exercising, trying to just rehab this leg back to strength. And couldn't sleep. It was way too stressful, hanging over me that I might face amputation if I don't work hard, all that kind of stuff. And I'll never forget it. I knew the security guards well because I was obviously a player, and I also worked there as well. And so they knew me by name, all that kind of stuff. And it's 2:00 in the morning, and I'm driving myself toward the SCG. And I was on those crutches, the Canadian crutches, and I've hopped myself into the gym, and it's manned 24 hours a day by security, and I flicked the lights on in the indoor centre. It's just changed. They've just demolished it. But back then, it would have been very easy for anyone to see from the outside or the inside that the indoor centre lights were on. And you couldn't just turn one light on. It was the entire centre, it was just glowing. And I could hear them and almost see them because I was elevated a little bit. I was sort of like marching down the stairs, like I think probably thinking that someone was,
had broken
a security
in.
breach or had broken in, done something like that. And I could just see them like feverishly marching toward me. And as they got there and they opened the thing, they were almost like really curiously looking, going, someone just using the gym. And they approached me very cautiously, and they're like, Kath? And I was like, yeah, hey, like, Kath, it's 2 a.m. What are you doing here? And I said, and I sort of stopped and said, give us a hand. I said, I've got a bit of an issue. This is the struggle that I'm leaning into at the moment. I've got a 2-week deadline to get, and essentially I just need to be here to exercise. Sorry, like I didn't realise. And they were like, no, it's fine, I think. But probably should have been kicking me out. And then instead of doing that, Bobby, a guy who I really grew to love, he was an older guy who must have drawn the short straw every night that week. He said, just leave it with me. And so I thought he was going back to seek permission or something like that. So I carried on my way, and he come back and he had electrical tape in his hand. And I was like, what's he doing? He said, here, I'll help. What do you need me to do? And so he said, I can't stay long. So he literally got the electrical tape and he started strapping my leg into the cross trainer that I was trying to navigate, but doing a very bad job of it because I was by myself. Everyone else was like in other moments that were daylight hours, I had people helping me, guide me around, but in that hour of the day, obviously no one was there. And so he got electrical tape and he strapped my left leg, which was the dusty one, into the machine. And I just remember in that moment, similar to the wheelchair one at the elevator, I just remember thinking, oh my God, this isn't a man who is not a doctor or a practitioner or someone with a medical background or with experience like that. He's just a man who cares. And it's given me goosebumps now because those moments are so powerful. And he just got innovative, and he was like, I don't know how to help. He obviously wanted to. Empathy must have been a strong trait for him. But, he comes back and does that. And I'm like, he should have been kicking me out. He definitely should have been kicking me out, and he hasn't. He's just helped. And he goes back to his post, comes back 45 minutes later. He's like, are you ready to get out now? And I said, I am. So he'd help me and then guide my leg. And then he's like, what's next? And I'd say, well, can we go on the spin bike now? And he'd go, yeah, of course. And he'd strap me in again and go back to his post. And those moments are so... they're so powerful, and kindness is truly transformative, like at every level, regardless of how we experience and when and all that kind of stuff. But I'd encourage anyone to think, like, we've all received kindness and we've all given it, right? Like in some way, shape or form, be it to a stranger or a person that we love. And I think when you look back on those moments, they're the ones that stand out to a lot of people in terms of what truly matters to people. Like, you hear of these stories about people on their deathbed and they're like, the biggest regret is I wish I didn't spend so much time at work, or I didn't do this, and it's all these things that we seem to prioritise in life, yet we sometimes forget to scale it back and just give a little bit of kindness. And I think they're the moments that anyone I've spoken to who's been through adversity, and I hear from a lot of people because of my life, they'll all say to me, I remember when a person did this and what it meant to me. And I think they can really inspire a lot of hope in terms of a person's struggle and what that means to them. And it could bring them right out of a hole. It's truly transformative, and it's the least costly, most effective agent to human change. Yet sometimes we forget about it. And I think that's why, I've received so much. And my job now is to give a little bit back, and that's what hopefully we're trying to achieve with the Kindness Factory and so forth. So I'm really proud of it.
In part 2 of our interview with Kath, she meets a handsome young stranger, a fellow patient actually. And look, what happens next in the story, well, you just can't make this stuff up. So go and download the second part of this interview with the founder of the Kindness Factory. It's in your podcast feed right now. Jump in to hear how Kath turns yet another series of challenges into a beautiful story of triumph. And eventually, also the kindness movement she's known for today.